Bungay Stanier here from Box of Crayons. Another webinar, this time getting into habit building. Gosh, it's a really hot topic at the moment, but I've got some really practical ways to help you build a habit that sticks. I'm actually recording this a little early. It's to support the book launch, which happens February the 29th, but I'm recording it on January the 1st, 2016. So somehow it's a appropriate day to talk about how to build a habit that sticks. And I love this quote from Steven Pressfield. I have something called the Great Work Podcast. I've been doing it for many years now. But my very, very first interview was with Steven Pressfield, who wrote The War of Art, a fantastic book about how to show up and do the work that needs to be done. And this is a quote that speaks exactly to that, the difference between an amateur and a professional, and how a professional has professional habits. And you can't get rid of old habits, old bad habits. They stay in our brain. We'll get to that in a minute. But you can build new good ones, and that's what this webinar is all about. So here I am, and I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me on social media, LinkedIn is the place to do it, and I'd invite you to reach out and do that. I'd love to have that connection with you. And I guess then the other thing just to say is this is about the book. It is called The Coaching Habit. So talking about habit building is perfectly appropriate. And right at the start of the book, I get into this is the new science we know about how to build a habit. And at Box of Crayons, we have something called the New Habit Formula. And that's what I'm going to teach you right now. Go into more depth in the book, of course. If you're curious about the book, it launches February the 29th. You can find out more at thecoachinghabit.com. The first week of March, we're going to have a ton of bonuses for people who buy copies of the book, kind of a celebration of the launch. But I do hope you'll consider picking up a copy. All right, let's get into this webinar. This will be another practical, useful webinar for you. Make sure you got pen and pencil handy. And I always start my webinars with this single question. So if you've seen any of the series, you'll know it by now. And it's simply this: how focused do you plan to be? This won't be a long webinar. I'm going to guess 15 minutes, thereabouts. So you don't have to stay focused for long. But in that 15 minutes or so that we have, how focused do you intend to be? Score yourself from 1 to 7. 1 low, 7 high. 1, in other words, I plan to be fully distracted during this entire webinar. I just will do my email the whole time. 7, on the other hand, I'm going to bring real focus to this webinar. I'm going to extract what's there. I'm going to do it by staying as intently focused on the content and the value that's to be found here as possible. And whatever your number, the choice is yours entirely. Just do this for me. Arrange your environment so you'll hit the number you've just given yourself. I know for me, when I'm watching a webinar, I try and put everything away. Shut down my email, hide my phone, do all that stuff that makes it difficult for me to get distracted from what's being taught. Okay, so at Box of Crayons, the way we earn a living is through our training programs. And our training programs are about helping busy managers and leaders coach in 10 minutes or less, giving them the tools so they can coach in 10 minutes or less. And in our programs, we always have this conversation as well: what is coaching? And people will have a conversation about, times they've been well coached themselves, and they extract from that insights about what good coaching looks like. And honestly, everybody kind of has the same list. People are curious, people give less advice, people ask more questions, give them a push when you needed a push, give them a hug and encouragement when they need a hug. They have all that. So people actually know what good coaching looks like. You don't need me to tell you what that is. You've probably experienced it. We do, however, teach a little bit about how we think about coaching at Box of Crayons, kind of the process behind coaching. And here's how we think about it. It's pretty simple, but it might be useful for you. It starts at the top there of the circle, insight. And good coaching and good questions will generate insight about yourself, but also about the situation at hand. Insight leads to positive behavior change. In other words, you do something differently. And after you do something differently, that increases the positive impact in the world. And hopefully it does actually become a virtuous circle, because the new impact will then generate new insights about yourself and about the situation. So this is the wonderful way that coaching can build on itself, generate knowledge, generate impact, make a real difference in the world. And, as part of the process of researching coaching over the many years I've been doing it, I've looked at a lot of definitions of coaching. There are a lot of them out there. And if there's one definition that seems to strike a chord with the most people, it's probably this one. From Sir John Whitmore. I actually know him a little bit, so I'll call him John. He's really one of the fathers of coaching. He's a British guy based in the UK. And there's something about this phrase, this quote, that really resonates for people. So you can see it there, unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance, helping them to learn rather than teaching them. There's a bunch of things that I know will resonate there with you. The unlocking piece, the fact that it's about them rather than about you, the coach. Helping, the difference between learning and teaching is something that often resonates with people. And actually, let me speak to that briefly. You may have come across another one of the webinar lesson series as part of this coaching habit launch called The Curse of Being an Expert. And really, in some ways, that's what a teacher does. You know, they're in that position of expertise and they download that content. And honestly, that doesn't often work that well. Think of all the advice you've been given in your time and think how much of it you quite frankly ignore, and then how much of it isn't that good anyway. And that's kind of how people feel about your advice as well. So helping them learn is often about actually how do you ask the questions that drive this new insight. And of course that's what the new book is all about. And in fact, I know you can see it in the corner there, but here we go. Here's the real book. I'm holding it in my hand. Just got delivered the other day, so I'm still excited about it. In the book, we actually share 7 core questions. Here they are. Everything from the kickstart question, how do you begin a conversation powerfully? The learning question, how do you wrap up a conversation so that new insight sticks? And a bunch of other questions there as well. But, you know, my guess is that I'm actually telling you stuff that you already know about here, which is, you know, there's something really powerful about asking a good question, about resisting giving people their solution, handing into advice. So on an intellectual level, we kind of all know this. But here's what I notice. Even though people know this intellectually, in practice, this is actually how people's management styles tend to look like. You can see that there. A whole lot of telling, not very much asking. And if you wanted to know why that's the case, the truth is that for most of us as managers and leaders and people functioning in the world of work, we have built habits of expertise, habits of telling people what to do, habits of leaping to solutions, habits of jumping into the action. And really what I'm trying to do in our programs and in the book as well is trying to slow that down a little bit. And to actually make that work, what I want to teach you in this webinar is actually what the science is behind building a habit, so that you can move from this habit, tell, to a habit where you ask more often, and you ask hopefully some of the 7 core questions that are in the Coaching Habit book. So let's talk about what habits are. And the starting point for me actually is this. It's a piece of research from Duke University that says at least 45% of our waking behavior is habitual. It's a stunning finding when you think about it. It makes sense, but it's stunning because it means that basically for half our working day, we're just on automatic. Our conscious mind isn't really engaged on it. That's what a habit means. You're just responding to stimulus and reacting to it in a certain way. You know, and it, certainly for me anyway, it makes me stop and think, gosh, well, you know, for that half, who's actually in charge of me? Because it's clearly not my conscious brain. It's just being run on automatic. And if you're wanting to know the actual chemistry about how brains work, well, it's all about neural pathways. And the metaphor that's often used in North America here is the Grand Canyon, but I'm going to do an Australian thing because I am Australian. So this is the Katherine Gorge up in the north of Australia. And the metaphor works the same. You know, the drop of water becomes the trickle, becomes the stream, becomes the river, and eventually the river carves a path through the landscape. And it's somewhat similar in the brain. You know, the first time you do something, there's a neural connection that's made. When it happens again, it gets fired along the same path. And when it happens again, it fires again. The more it happens, the stronger that connection works. Myelin gets wrapped around it. Dan Coyle's book, The Talent Code, is really interesting and all of that sort of stuff. Before you know it, kind of metaphorically, you've got these grooves like the Katherine Gorge in your brain about familiar, well-run habits that you have. And they actually never go away. It's not like they kind of get filled in with brain putty or something over time. So for you to shift out of this groove, if that's your old habit, you need to understand the new habit, the new science, and you need to make new connections. And of course, there's some terrible, terrible information out there about how to build habits on the internet. You know, most of it just completely wrong. My guess is you've heard the do it for 21 days thing. Somebody just made that up. Actually, that's not exactly true. The connection, as I understand it, is this. When plastic surgery began, a plastic surgeon noticed that it took people about 3 weeks to get used to a new nose after they'd had a nose operated on. And somehow from that, we've got do something for 21 days and a new habit is formed. Now, the good news is there's actually a lot of good information out there about building habits, and we've taken that to build the new habit formula, which I'm getting to for you on this webinar. And the two people I go to most around this, here's Charles Duhigg. He wrote a book called The Power of Habit, and it's a terrific book, funny, smart, well written. You'll laugh, you'll cry. And his insight for me was around that a habit has 3 parts to it. There's the trigger, the thing that sets you off, the thing that stimulates and provokes you to behave in a way. Then there's the behavior. And then there's the reward, the little part of your brain that goes, yeah, do that again. That was worth it. You should do it again for sure. And the insight we'll capture from that habit loop is the importance of understanding the trigger. You got to figure the trigger. If you don't understand what your trigger is, it's really hard for you to change your behavior because you're already in it before you can consciously decide not to do it. So his key insight for me is know what your triggers are that set off the old behavior that you're trying to change. Then the other person I tend to go to is a guy called BJ Fogg. He doesn't have a book that I know of, but he has a wonderful website called tinyhabits.com. And his key insight is this. If you're going to define a new habit, define it in a way that takes 60 seconds or less to complete. Because if you do a habit any bigger than that, your big brain basically finds a way to hack the system and have you default to your old way of behaving. So, you know, it's January the 1st, as I said. And if you're thinking to yourself, okay, this year I'm going to exercise. What you don't want to do is make a habit that says, this year my new habit is to go for a run every day. You want to make it a 60-second habit. So what's a 60-second habit? Well, it's something like this. When I wake up in the morning, after I feed the cat, because I have a cat, so I have to feed her, I'm going to put on my running shoes and step out the door. And that's it. Put on my running shoes and step out the door. That's about a 60-second action. And I can't really think of many reasons why I couldn't put on running shoes and step out the door. And of course, once I'm out the door, that kind of micro habit allows me then to probably go, well, I'm dressed, I've got my shoes on, I've left the building, I may as well go for a run now. So this key insight of his is around find the small 60-second starter habit, and that will open up and get the momentum going for the next habit. It reminds me a bit of David Allen's work in Getting Things Done, where he says you can't do a project, you can only do the next action. So define the next action. BJ Fogg's coming at a similar perspective around that. So we've taken Duhigg's work and BJ Fogg's work and a bunch of other folks who are thinking about habits and triggers and the like, and we've created this simple but powerful formula for you now. It's called the New Habit Formula, and of course it's in the book, but here it is in summary. When this happens, this is when you define the trigger, the thing that stimulates you, provokes you to behave in the old way. Instead of, this is when you define the old behavior, so you're clear about what you're looking to shift. I will. And then you define your new behavior, a new behavior that is going to be more productive, more effective, have more impact, have more meaning for you, has that change of behavior that you're hungry for. In the context of our coaching piece, it's often going to be about asking a question. And perhaps if you picked up the book, one of the 7 essential questions. You know, so to give you an example, when this happens, when Simon comes into my office and goes blah, 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 instead of, and normally I'd leap in and fix it for him or tell him what to do or give him the answer. So instead of giving him the answer, I will, and I'd ask him perhaps the challenging question, which is a really powerful question. I think it's number 3 on the list, which is, so what's the real challenge here for you? What's the real challenge here for you? And you can see now I'm building a really specific new habit. I'm not going to get triggered by Simon into my advice monster giving. I'm going to use that to build a new habit so that when Simon comes in, I've got a new habit embedded that will make me more coach-like with Simon. So there we go. That's the key things I wanted to cover off in that. Talk about DUHIGG, FOG, give you the new habit formula. Make sure you capture what you want to remember from this. The 2 critical insights you want to write down, because if you don't write them down, you will forget them. And what's an action you want to take? Or even better, what's a new habit you want to actually implement? Try out that new habit formula and actually test it out for you and see how it goes. And then just a quick way of wrapping up here. Again, if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd like to connect with you too, so do reach out. And then finally, this is about the book, The Coaching Habit. It comes out February the 29th. It's exciting. I really do think it's an outstandingly good book, and I say that with all modesty. I know I'm a little biased, but I've had other nice people like Dan Pink and others say good things about the book as well. And I think you'll find it practical and useful. So certainly swing by thecoachinghabit.com, take a look if you'd like. And that first week of March, so February the 29th to I think March the 4th, we're going to have a short little launch party where we're going to offer some interesting bonuses. So maybe take advantage of that as well.